So this question arose when I was watching some documentaries about the situation in Syria in the Middle East, about the terrible war and recently the devastating earthquake on top of it all, where many thousands of victims were in a situation where they could not receive help because of the political situation. And the situation really is beyond tragic. And as I was watching that and watching so many innocent people suffer, it did leave me with a strong feeling of why, which is of course a question that you've been asked many, many times. The question of why does the LCS allow such terrible things? And your answer usually boils down to something like LCS is not some old man with a white beard sitting on a cloud playing with his pet people. We come here with free will and we create this situation for ourselves, and that's how we learn. And I understand that, but I'm not sure that I find that answer completely satisfying. For example, I work as a teacher, and I always make sure that my students, regardless of their level, get presented with challenges where they have a high probability, let's say 80 to 90% probability, of succeeding and receiving positive feedback. And that if they do end up making a mistake, that they can quickly learn from that mistake and turn the situation back into something more positive. In other words, I see it as my responsibility as a teacher to make the learning process as pleasant, positive, happy, and rewarding for my students as possible. If I present them with a situation in which they fail in a way that is harsh and painful, then I see that as my mistake as a teacher. Similarly, we don't take a bunch of young children and leave them in a room that is full of dangerous weapons on their own without any parental guidance and say, oh, well, that's just up to them and their free will. If they end up slaughtering each other, that'll be a good learning experience. Of course, it's our responsibility as parents and grown-ups to put them in a situation that is constructive rather than destructive. So sometimes, for example, when I look at the situation in Syria, it doesn't seem like the LCS is doing the same with us. Obviously, humans are creating massive suffering for themselves and each other. Why doesn't the LCS create a learning environment that is a bit less brutal and a bit more wholesome? In my view, you can do that and preserve free will.
Okay. You see it as your responsibility to make the learning process a pleasant, positive, constructive, happy, rewarding for them. Okay, my response to that is that's because you have the much easier job of teaching them facts, not how to be, how to have better attitudes, how to care for and love others. Human or not, love the dogs and the cats and everything else as well. You would have to teach them how to get rid of their fears and to be better human beings. Not to act like better human beings, but to be better human beings. You would have to teach your students to get rid of all of their religious dogma, their social dogma, their cultural dogmas, and their beliefs in order to accomplish that. I think the school who employed you, the children's parents, and almost everybody else would tar and feather you and run you out of town almost immediately if you did that, and thus you would fail. Okay, now, so there's a difference between what's going on here and what the students are and what they're trying to learn. They're not trying to learn facts here. You're trying to teach your students facts, and they get the facts, but if they don't, then you encourage them, give them a better example, and so on. So teaching facts is one thing. Teaching people how to be and to get rid of their fear and to grow up, well, that's going to run you into unfortunate fights with your school, with their parents, with everybody else in the system is going to not want you to do that, because when you help them get rid of their fears, and their parents don't think those are fears, they think those are necessary things to keep them out of trouble, or something else, there's going to be a problem. So at the end, you say, in my view, you can do that and preserve free will. In other words, you can be less brutal and a bit more wholesome You can do that and preserve free will. But it is not the natural environment that is brutal. It's the humans that are brutal. How do you change the humans without overrunning their free will? They choose to be brutal. Now, occasionally, the environment is brutal. An earthquake, tidal wave, a rainstorm that doesn't want to quit. Occasionally, those things happen. But that's just part of the rule set. Those things have to happen. You know, it's just the nature of the rules here that they would have to happen. And in any virtual reality that is natural, that has evolved to be natural, I think those things would have to happen. You have a water cycle, you know, there has to be a water cycle. Sometimes that water cycle is just going to pile up and put a deluge someplace. You have to have air and winds, and sometimes just on chance, not all the time, but 1 in 100,000, you know, it's going to damage these 10,000 people here. But that 1 in a 10,000 thing happens eventually, and the magma comes up, and you got a volcano, and a lot of people die. But it's just part of the natural world that there are risks involved in a natural place. And I don't think you can create a functional natural world where that's not the case, where maybe you can create an unnatural world that you program where that's not the case. You could program a world where, you know, those things didn't happen, because the world would only be what you program it to be. But if you set up a rule set and initial conditions and evolve a world because you want your world to be natural, not some kind of made up space, but a natural space where people could be in it and believe that they were in a natural physical space, then I don't think you could do that. So the problem is, it's not that the environment is so destructive that causes all the problems. The problems is that the people are destructive. That's the problem. Okay, so how do you change the humans who are destructive without overrunning their free will? You can't. You see, that's the catch. So these people choose to be brutal because they're not very grown up. Now, the reason that those naturally brutal things like earthquakes and tsunamis and so on, the reason that those are so brutal is because the people are so brutal, in the sense that if people were giving and caring, when those kinds of things happen, we'd be all over helping the people. We'd be all over, helping them get out of there before the earthquake happens. We would be thinking about that because we'd care about all those people. And we'd say, oh, looks like a big storm's coming. Hey, let's help get all the people out of Miami because it's going to be a big storm. And then we'd all help to rebuild it. And we'd all help to get them back on their feet and, restart businesses. And I mean, everybody would be helping everybody else. So that the brutality that comes from the earth could be reduced to almost nothing if the people themselves weren't brutal. But the people are brutal is why, okay, why should I care? I didn't have an earthquake, so it doesn't bother me any. And the people there and the governments and so on, we're a money-based environment. We run on money here, and they don't have enough money to help all those people get restarted, not enough money to get them all out of town before things happen or to rebuild everything. So because we are control, power, force-based, that's why we're money-based. Money is control, power, and force. So as long as we're control, power, and force-based, we're going to be money-based. And if we're money-based, then we don't really care about poor people because they don't have much money, and therefore they're just not all that important. That's the problem. If we weren't money-based, if we were love-based, then the hiccups and the earthquakes and the volcanoes and all that stuff would have a minimum impact. We would do everything. Everybody would, and the whole world would get together and help put that all back together again. You can't help those things, but you can be smart about getting warnings and getting the people out in time and getting them back and rebuilding and relocating. And if you had all the world's resources put together to do that, Well, shoot, it's only what, 10, 20, 100,000 people? The whole world has enough resources to redo those that many people. Just give them houses. Build up their companies and their factories again. Just help them get back to where they were, because that would be a good thing to do. So there wouldn't be a problem with it. There's plenty of wealth and resources to do that in the world. So where it did happen to erupt and nobody was expecting it and people died, well, that would be the way it is. Life is risky sometimes, but all the survivors wouldn't necessarily have to crawl around in poverty for the next 10 years trying to figure out, how to get their life back together. That could be solved in a few months, or we could find some other place for them to live and get them there and give them jobs and employment and, give them a nice situation. So the problem is not that the larger conscious system could do better. It's that it can't do any better because we aren't any better, and it can't force us to be any better than we are. So that's the problem. It all boils down to us having a very low quality of consciousness, that we don't help each other out. We don't care about each other. And that's what makes these disasters really big disasters that they wouldn't have to be. It's not the Earth's fault. The Earth is just a natural environment with a rule set. And okay, sometimes it's going to hiccup and burp and do other things that will hurt the people. But we could eliminate probably 90% of that damage if we all pulled together. If that's an area over there that's seismically active, well, we should have sensors all over that thing, letting us know when an earthquake is about to happen. Well, we don't, because they cost money, and nobody's going to put sensors around a place like that because there's not that much wealth there to care. Now, we have sensors all along the Andreas Fault, Southern California. We've got lots of them, probably $100 million in sensors and things there, because that makes a big difference to us. But over in Syria, we don't, because we don't care that much about Syrians to spend that kind of money in Syria. So we have it here, and when things get to be right near like it's going to go, and we feel those little shakes, we'll tell people, get out now while you can, and they'll probably have a week's notice. And the ones that stay, well, that's their choice. It's their risk. So, it's just us that's the problem, not the LCS.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Like I was watching that and I just had this deep feeling of sadness. And
Yeah,
but yeah, of course, when you think about it, it's like we humans created that situation. And so you can say, all right, system, just take it away, make it lighter and more pleasant for us. But that's our feedback. We created that. So
yeah.
removing that, we wouldn't see ourselves as clearly, but by removing that. And so that does make a lot of sense.
Otherwise, okay, the system says, all right, I'm going to help you people out. I'll make that earthquake go away and whatever, and it'll be nice. And here you have all your buildings back. Okay, I've got it. And that then also gets in the way of our growing up. Now, we're not going to grow up as long as daddy's going to take care of us. Now, children have to leave home and get along on their own, under their own steam. If they stayed home and lived in their parents' basement all the rest of their life, with free rent and free food and so on, they would never grow up very much. They have to get out and live life and make choices and get the results of those choices all on their own. So if daddy always fixed things, all right, the larger consciousness come in and keep those natural things away from people. But it would just interfere with those people's growth. It wouldn't. How could it do it and make it look like a natural thing? That okay, we have lots of storms, but as soon as they get to land, they stop.
Yes.
That's not natural. It's unnatural. So there's some unnatural thing going on. Well, then people would say, how can I control that unnatural thing? You know, if we all pray to the LCS, is he going to protect us from things like that? Well, we go back like 10,000 years ago to the religious things, right? You pray to God to protect you from earthquakes.
Yeah.
And that's not going forward. That's actually going backward. And you don't want to live under the auspices of daddy bailing you out when things get tough. You need to grow to the point that you are self-sufficient. And we need to care enough about each other that we help each other. We help those people who can't care for themselves. We give them some help. And there's, like I say, there's plenty of wealth in the world that things like that wouldn't even use 10% of it. If we
Yeah.
had the attitude to deal with it like that. So it's really us. It's really us. It can't come in and just fix things for us. That would just create another religion, and people, instead of growing up, they'd pray. I don't have to grow up. I can just
Yes.
I can pray and get what I want. So yeah, that
I,
doesn't work. It just gives them a different reality to grow up in, and one that's not quite as good as far as giving them challenges.
yeah, there was one thought that I wrote down here to my own question, which is the more the system helps to create a softer, less challenging learning environment, the less significant and deep the learning will be. The greater the challenge and responsibility, the greater the gain, if
Exactly.
successful. Okay, good. Well, that covers that question. I think you addressed that really well.
I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We will continue to post videos for free on my YouTube channel, but please understand, these videos are expensive to produce. They represent many thousands of hours of production and editing, as well as all the necessary audiovisual equipment, computers, and software. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.